one thing, because I totally agree with you, Keith. I think the challenge is about the volume of different things that are facing us. And I oversee a team of folks who I'd say the one thing that we have discussed quite a bit is how do you know what to focus on first? What matters the most? Where can you have the biggest impact? And also knowing that that might shift from day to day. And so it moves less from like, we're going to control all of these variables to we're going to try to coordinate our response in a more strategic and cohesive way by forming partnerships, right? I mean, and this is the whole web network model, I think, of leadership is that no one person can do it all. Like we have to create systems and supports to create those networks. And then that will ultimately, I think, address some of the concerns about burnout and capacity. But I think we live and exist in a field that is really individually driven, right?
Hello, and welcome to Student Affairs Now. I'm usually one of your hosts, Keith Edwards. Today, I get to be one of the guests. Higher education leaders today aren't facing one unprecedented challenge, they're facing all of them simultaneously. In this conversation, the tables got flipped, and fellow co-host Heather Shea and I were invited to join TACUSPA's Dr. Anthony Edwards to explore what it actually takes to lead well in a moment defined by volatility, external scrutiny, shifting technology, and institutional inertia. From the importance of inner work and learning agility to the promise of curricular approaches and the peril of reactive AI adoption, Heather and I offer grounded, honest perspectives from our combined decades in the field and many conversations here on Student Affairs Now. So whether you're navigating your first 90 days in a new role or trying to lead a division through sustained uncertainty, this conversation is for leaders who want to be the calm at the center of the storm rather than just another casualty of it. Student Affairs Now is the premier podcast and online learning community for thousands of us who work in, alongside, or adjacent to the field of higher education and student affairs. We release new episodes every week on Wednesdays. Find details about this episode or browse our archives at studentaffairsnow.com. Thanks to our partnership with TACUSPA, this episode is also sponsored by Evolve. Evolve offers 4 leadership coaching journeys designed to expand capacity and build capabilities, empowering courageous leadership to transform institutions and reimagine the future of higher education. And with that, let's turn it over to our TACUSPA hosts, Dr. Hilda Billups and Dr. Anthony Edwards.
Greetings. Thank you for viewing this webinar. My name is Dr. Hilda Billups, and I currently serve as the Director of Webinars for TACUSPA, the Texas Association of College and University Student Personnel Administrators. You will notice we've changed the format for this webinar just a bit. TACUSPA is pleased to welcome Dr. Keith Edwards and Dr. Heather Shea, co-hosts of Student Affairs Now, to a conversation about leading in challenging times. Allow me to introduce our facilitator for today's webinar. Dr. Anthony Edwards supports TACUSPA as the Director of Research and as a member of the Webinars Committee. Anthony serves as an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Technology at Tarleton State University. Anthony's teaching assignments include higher education leadership, higher education student services, higher education finance, higher education policy and politics, higher education history, and the Comprehensive Community College. Dr. Edwards previously served as Director of Tarleton Online at Tarleton State University, a professor of biology at Panola College, Senior Vice President of Talent at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, and Science Department Chair at Granbury High School. Dr. Edwards also served as a secondary science teacher in Fort Worth ISD and Huckabee ISD. Anthony's research agenda focuses on organizational change in higher education with respect to strategic planning, STEM education, higher education marketing, academic advising, and educational technology. Anthony has published manuscripts in the Journal of Higher Education Management and the HAPS Educator. In addition to chairing dissertation committees, Dr. Edwards supports student success as coordinator of the Higher Education Leadership Concentration of the Master of Education program in Educational Administration. We're very excited to have Dr. Edwards serve as our facilitator for this webinar and are thankful to Dr. Shea and Dr. Edwards for their willingness to share. I will now turn our webinar over to Dr. Edwards.
Thank you, Dr. Billups. So Dr. Keith Edwards believes that higher education leaders become the calm eye at the center of the storm so that they can lead with and through it. Through Evolve, Keith partners with assistant vice presidents, deans, directors, and vice presidents on leadership coaching journeys that build the internal and structural capacity to lead through the uncertainty, not just survive it. Through the curricular approach, Keith helps institutions bring intentionality, alignment, integration, and clarity to learning beyond the classroom, turning disconnected programs into coherent educational systems. Keith has consulted with more than 400 organizations, logged more than 1,500 hours as a certified leadership and executive coach, and published more than 25 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. Keith co-authored the Curricular Approach to Student Affairs and co-hosts Student Affairs Now, premier podcasts in the field. Those who have worked with Keith describe him as an unconventional scholar, trusted leader, and authentic educator. Also, Dr. Heather Shea works as the Director of Pathways Persistence Programs and Undergraduate Student Success in the Office of the Provost at Michigan State University. Her career in student affairs spans over 2 decades and 5 different campuses. It also involves experiences in many different functional areas, including residence life, student activities, commuter and non-traditional student services, and leadership development. Heather also identifies as a generalist in student affairs. Heather's committed to scholarship and preparing the next generation of higher education leaders. She regularly teaches undergraduate and graduate level classes each summer, and she leads a 6-credit undergraduate education abroad program in Europe for students in teacher education. Heather served as president of ACPA, College Student Educators International from 2023 to 2024, and she was honored as a Diamond honoree by the ACPA Foundation. And she's also completed her PhD at Michigan State University in higher adult and lifelong education. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Edwards and Dr. Shea.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're going to have a Dr. Edwards off here. So,
yes, the Council of Dr. Edwards here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
So now we'll start with our questions. Our first question is for Heather. You talked about I talked about some of the things that you've done, but I'd like to know a little bit more about your professional journey and kind of how you got here and some of your previous roles.
Yeah. So in the bio that you read, it says that I have been on 5 different campuses. I will also say that 3 of those campuses were in the West. I identify strongly as being from the West. I grew up in Colorado, went to Colorado State, then was at the University of Arizona and Idaho before coming here. And I think my journey, I used to think of myself as a generalist, and then I spent over 10 years working in women and gender centers. And so while I'm not currently doing that work, I think I've returned back to more of a holistic perspective. I think in general, my work has always been around making sure that not only do students have access to college and have great programming while they're there, but that they thrive and ultimately graduate. And my current role in undergraduate education is really based around working closely with first-gen students and really thinking about not only access, but also belonging, mattering, and then how that coincides with student success. And yes, I have the opportunity every summer to lead an undergraduate study abroad program. We are on the countdown. I leave on May 1st. And Keith and I will figure out how we're going to do the podcast while we're gone. It'll all be great, but it's a fabulous additional role that I get to play. And I'm excited every year. This year, I have 20 students that are going with me to 4 countries in Europe over 3 weeks.
Wow. I mean, it's an interesting connection between academic and student affairs and how you make that work, which is, I think, very powerful.
Yeah.
All right. So Keith,
Mhm.
yeah, I think in your role, you work with a lot of student affairs leaders around the country. What are some of the challenges student affairs leaders are facing right now, and how do you recommend they overcome them?
Well, maybe the real question is which challenges aren't they facing? Heather and I were just both at ACPA, and I got to lead several sessions while I was there, and we hosted some socials and some events and things like that with the podcast. And as you mentioned, talking about curricular approaches and Evolve. So I got to talk with people, I got to listen to people, And I was listening, I was just hearing just all the pressure that student affairs leaders are under at all levels. And, I think folks like Vernon Wall remind us that the sort of uh, scrutiny that we're under
Mm,
and the attacks on certain aspects of our work are not new. Those have happened before, which I think is a wonderful reminder to those of us
mm,
who don't have that much history. I think what is really new, though, is all of these happening at the same time, right?
Mhm.
From state and federal executive orders to scrutiny for media organizations to shifts in AI and technology to an enrollment cliff, um, you know, to changing workforce and higher ed to still
mm,
recovering from COVID and work from home and how do we navigate all of that. Um, One of the things that I noticed while I was at ACPA is I didn't hear people talk about budget cuts. I
mm,
didn't hear them talk about student mental health. I didn't hear them talk about the enrollment cliff. I didn't hear them talk about graduation rates because it's not that those aren't issues. They're just, they're the wallpaper. Like they're of course.
right.
Um, and I think, your other part of the question is how do we overcome it? I think Heather and I were in grad school together many years ago. We'll just leave it at that. And we learned a lot of really great things, and almost none of it will serve us today.
Mm,
Correct.
Almost none of it will serve us today. And so, if you have a master's degree in student affairs or higher education or something else or social work, or you have a PhD, I don't know how much of what you've learned in those programs is going to help you navigate say AI and how you're going to integrate it into your leadership and practice or how your institution should level. I don't know how you use that. I don't know what you learn to navigate the complexities of the external scrutiny that we're under. And so I think we have to turn to not what we know,
mhm,
but the skills and capacities we have to learn, to be adaptable, to be nimble, to listen with empathy in difficult moments, to be strategic, to be thoughtful. And that's really hard to do when you're super busy and overwhelmed and reactive and dealing with the crisis of the moment. I think one of the things I notice is that people are moving so quickly right now, so fast, that their institutions are moving slowly because they're not
mm,
thoughtful and planful. They don't have space to think and navigate. So institutions are moving incredibly slowly. A lot of that is by design, some of that is by lack of capacity, while individual leaders are just barely keeping up.
right.
And those things are related because individual leaders can barely keep up. They're not able to lead their institutions to be nimble, to be flexible, to be innovative, to creative, to be transformational. So in the bio you read, how do we be the calm center at the center of the
Mhm.
storm so we can lead with and through it? Because there's a lot of energy in the storm, right, for
Mhm,
Yeah.
change and transformation as well. But we're just not capitalizing on it because we don't have the capacity to do so.
Yeah. I'll
yeah,
add one thing because I totally agree with you, Keith. I think the challenge is about the volume of different things that are facing us. And as I oversee a team of folks who I'd say the one thing that we have discussed quite a bit is how do you know what to focus on first?
mm,
What matters the most? Where can you have the biggest impact? And also knowing that that might shift from day to day. And so it moves less from like, we're going to control all of these variables to we're going to try to coordinate our response in a more strategic and cohesive way by forming partnerships, right? I mean, and
mm,
this is the whole web network model, I think, of leadership is that no one person can do it all. Like we have to create systems and supports to create those networks and then that will ultimately I think address some of the concerns about burnout and capacity uh, but I think we live and exist in a field that is really individually driven, right? Individual leaders kind of taking on too much. um, so yeah, there's so many challenges.
yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I mean, in thinking about what both of you are saying, obviously higher ed is in a period of change, right? I go back to, I was a biology teacher and we talked about gradualism where there's periods where there's not much change and then periods where there's a whole lot of change, and I feel like we're in one of those periods where there's a lot of change. And I think now that I'm on the academic side, I think what I'm trying to do is sort of teach my students frameworks for thinking about how to solve complex problems, because the topics of the day obviously are going to change. But I do think, whether it's leadership frameworks or, communication or, some of these other, types of frameworks, I think is important, just as a broad, mindset or policy or, any of these things, because, laws will change, but some of the processes don't always change as quickly as the laws change. And so I think it's important, as from someone who, at least from TACUSPA's standpoint, I think about, okay, how do we integrate research? How do we integrate theory? How do we do those things? As folks who, have gone through those master's and doctoral level experiences, both of you have done, examples of scholarship. Um, how are you sort of integrating, at least maybe from a broad standpoint, the things that the process of being a thinker and tinkerer to the work that you do?
Keith, you want to start off on that? I have lots.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if I were to be really hard on higher education, I would say the world around higher education institutions is changing dramatically,
Correct.
and we're not.
Correct.
We're not changing. We are not adapting. As I mentioned, some of that's capacity, but some of it is institutions are designed to be slow to change on purpose, right? So we're not going with the fad of the moment, but we're not facing the fad of the moment. We're talking about dramatic changes. We talk about this VUCA world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And people either argue it shouldn't be this way. These things shouldn't be happening, which is an argument with reality, or they want to wait it out. They want to wait for the storm to pass. And I don't think that VUCA is just going to get more and more complex, right? As we used to talk about changes in AI year to year. Now we're talking about changes in AI week to week.
Correct.
Right? Dramatic changes. Legislation changing, the world around us, students changing. I used to say, I went to college 25, 30 years ago, and my mental model is outdated. I think now, if you went to college 4 years ago, your mental model is outdated about how people navigate it, how social media, how their phones, how they're using AI. Like, you don't even know. But I think you're right. I think frameworks can be helpful. I think knowledge is less precious than it ever was, but I think skills and capacity. So not much that I read or learned in my doctoral program, which was a fabulous program, and I'm not criticizing it in any way, is still relevant. But the ability to learn that I learned serves me 12 times a day. The ability to scan what is nonsense, what is helpful, what is the signal within the noise. That skill that I really honed in that process of my doctoral program, just incredibly, incredibly useful as we go. So I'm talking about with senior leaders, you spent a career developing an expertise that will no longer serve you in this role. You developed years of developing capacities and successful that got you promotion. And now that capacity, you don't even do that anymore. And then I think the other thing is that higher education's whole focus is learning and growth and development. And we don't take that approach with higher education leaders. We have a very fixed mindset. We promote someone within to be our hero. We hire someone from external to be our savior. And then we sit back and watch and see if the search was done right or not. If not, we get rid of them. We do another expensive search, or worse yet, we keep them as an ineffective leader. How do we teach these leaders to be successful? How do we help them grow? How do we help them learn? How do we mentor them? How do we support them? How do we develop their capacities? We have tons of smart, talented, capable people on these campuses, and we're not nurturing them into the leaders that they could be.
You went in a different direction.
Go ahead.
You went slightly different direction than I was going to take that question, Keith, but I agree with you that we hold people to this standard that is really unreachable. The other thing I was going to mention, though, is that I think on the Student Affairs Now podcast, and particularly with some of the different offshoot formats like current campus context, we're really trying to help leaders kind of discern quickly what is the signal within the noise, and how do the actions that you take tomorrow potentially respond to that in a meaningful way. the 5 correspondents who are kind of staying continuously attuned to what's bubbling up, have taught me so much about, tracking, and then also kind of distilling that in a way that makes, for student affairs folks, for folks who are in higher ed, for parents of students, what are the things that I really need to be worried about or take action on my campus? And so building that kind of offshoot podcast, Current Campus Context, of the Student Affairs Now channel has been hopefully one of the things that both keeps our learner kind of moving, but also brings some really practical, applicable skills to folks who might be overwhelmed and just opening up the news apps, right? As I am often. So.
Yeah. So Heather, in your world right now, what's your scope of responsibilities? Like, so what are some of the areas that you manage? And,
Sure.
I know you talked about how you help your team, but how
Yeah.
do you sort of keep yourself sane and managing these different pieces?
Yeah. Yeah. So the Pathways Persistence Programs is a kind of what we're called a group of academic cohort programs on campus. Michigan State is a massive institution, 55,000 students. And so on most big campuses, we talk about how to make the campus feel smaller. And we know when students are connected to smaller communities, they're more academically successful. They, again, their presence matters, and they can find those peer connections with mentors and others. So the 5 Pathways programs, TRIO, Student Support Services, is probably the one most people are familiar with because it's a nationally, federally funded program. So we have that program within the Pathways program. And then all of the other ones are kind of similar in some ways, but focus on bringing students with similar characteristics or backgrounds or even academic areas of interest together into these smaller cohort communities. I have a team of about 12 full-time staff folks, and I have learned within this space, which is definitely it right squarely in academic affairs, that we are all doing student affairs work. I mean, I think that dichotomy between that there's this line between academic and student affairs work has really been blurred when we start talking about student success, because those are they're everybody's students, and campuses and students don't necessarily see the differentiation. On some campuses, the programs I work with could be in student affairs. Our work, though, is really grounded around kind of 5 opportunity areas of student success, which all kind of lead towards Michigan State University's general goal to close opportunity gaps and decrease time to degree. And I think as we build like these strong individual programs, I'm really interested in how we can scale those to reach a broader audience and maybe even replicate the models, so that there's a true ecosystem of student support. This whole idea is actually grounded in a institutional deficit philosophy. So people may hear that and go, what do you mean exactly? I think many campuses have done the, look to the left, look to the right, one of you won't be here anymore. And they kind of put that on students to be in charge of their own success. Our vice provost and our campus broadly has really adopted this notion that if students are going to be admitted to Michigan State, it's our responsibility in partnership with the student to ensure that they can be successful and ultimately learn, thrive, and graduate. So the institutional deficit model is like, we need to actually adjust the institution to meet students who are coming through our gates. The work is really around this idea that an ecosystem of student support is really going to build those communities where people find and stay and connect with one another. The other thing I will also say, and I don't know if I could talk about my role in higher ed without also talking about my role as a parent. I have a daughter who's a junior in college, not here at Michigan State. But my son is a senior in high school, and he just recently declared that he is committed to Michigan State. He declared this on Instagram, of course, and I had to find it there, and had some words about. It's interesting that I was scrolling Instagram and I discovered that you've actually made your final decision. But as a parent, watching him navigate that college choice process, and then also visiting other campuses and really asking questions about how they define student success. How do students who are participants in specific programs do compared to those who don't have access to those resources? I'm sure I'm the parent in the back of the room that every campus tour leader is like, oh no, she's like having studied this and now also working in an institution that's taking this really seriously. But as a parent of now almost 2 college students, I'm really curious and anxious about higher education's future. So.
Very interesting. And I think I'll segue to a question. Keith talked a little bit about AI, and I'm going to ask him to talk a little more about that in a minute. But as a parent, we're hearing all these things about, well, how is AI going to impact our, students who are going into college or graduating? And, I think I'm just curious from your perspective, both as a parent and as someone who works at a university, how does that maybe impact at all the way you support your own children, but maybe even your students that you serve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this has been a huge topic of conversation on our campus, as I know it has been on many others. And it's interesting. I just read a blog post by Keith the other day that was talking about the never evers versus the what's the other end?
All in.
All in, yeah, all in and never evers. And I would say that on our campus, at least, we are definitely taking seriously the notion that if students, AI is probably not going to replace the job, but students who know how to effectively use artificial intelligence will be hired more often than students who don't. And in talking with employers, we have a huge job readiness component to our institution's priorities. There is a lot of push and pressure, I think, on institutions to bring students up to speed around effective use of AI and ethical use of AI. I think the other piece for it for students is understanding where that boundary is and having conversations where and when AI use might be appropriate. I mentioned my study abroad. The study abroad is called Learning Culture and Technology in Europe, LCTE. And the technology piece we take very seriously. My co-instructor and I integrate AI and many other forms of technology into our program. I don't have to get into all the specifics, but we encourage it. We encourage it because we want to have conversations about how to use it effectively and how it can just be a life skill also. And Keith's continuum, I would probably be on the all-in end of this, but I recognize the complicated discussion. But every time a new technology has been introduced into the higher ed ecosystem, we have, the sky is falling. Oh no, what does it mean that we're replacing our campus mail system with email, right? Like, honestly, like we need to be better at learning, embracing, adopting, and then talking ethically about how we utilize those skills. So that's my perspective on AI. And it's interesting because this is probably the biggest debate that is going on in my circles, both on my campus as well as in my own household.
All
Keith, I
right.
don't know
Thank
what
you
else
for
you'd
that.
say.
Keith,
Yeah.
what about you? I know you're, again, surveying lots of
Mhm.
student affairs leaders. Where are you seeing maybe opportunities? Where are you seeing apprehensiveness? Uh, you know, yeah.
I'll just say, and Heather alluded to it, but I'll say briefly that the thing that I see is we're being reactionary about AI
Mm-hmm.
and we're not being thoughtful about it. I had a talk with a faculty member who taught a ethical AI course, And he said, I got people coming in who are all in. I use it for everything. It's the best thing that's ever happened. And people who said, I will never, it's unethical, it's unsustainable, it's going to end society. And when those people came together and spent a semester really thinking about it, really exploring it, everyone kind of came to the middle. The all-in folks were kind of like, well, I shouldn't use it for everything. There are some downsides. I should be
Mhm.
thoughtful and careful. And the never will I ever were like, well, I can be thoughtful and I can be careful.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the thing that I'm seeing. I'm also seeing this with institutions. Institutions are I talked with a vice president who said there was a cabinet meeting where the president declared that we will be an AI institution. And this vice president said, what does that mean? And they said, we'll figure it out later. So they're being reactionary. They want to get on the bandwagon. They want to advance this. They want to create an AI institution. They want to put it on their website. They want to put it on letterhead. They want to talk about it. And they haven't thought about what that means. What's that going to be? And so I think we need to move away from being reactionary and to be thoughtful about our response as individuals, as leaders, as institutions. And it's really, as we said earlier, it's really hard to do when you're also um, getting all the pressures from all the places and all the things and overwhelmed, and you have staff attrition and disengagement, and you're trying to navigate all of that. It's just another really hard thing to navigate.
Mhm.
And for those that are a little maybe nervous
Mhm.
about it, as leaders, how might they take some, steps to get their feet in the water and also model behavior for their teams?
Mhm.
Well, I think just be thoughtful. I think it's also changing so rapidly. So I was
Mhm.
talking with one leader who said, every query is like 7 trees. And I was like, well, I don't think that's true. And if it was true, it's no longer true as these technologies get faster and more efficient and more important. And so there's a lot of things. Also, if you tried AI a year ago,
Yeah.
it's completely different now. And so I think even if you are really thoughtful about it and really don't feel like this is something that is for you at all, I get that. I understand that. That's a reasonable perspective. I still think you need to know and be informed about it. And so I think there's lots of ways to do that. There's there's no shortage of experts, but I would say that if you're going to want to learn about AI, you got to really pay attention to things that have come out in the past month
Yep.
or the past week would be better because it is
Yep.
it is so dynamically. I mean, today as we're recording this, Anthropic came out with a brand new model last night
Yep.
that they're not releasing because it's too dangerous. It could
Mm.
really undo a lot of things. So they're not even releasing their brand new most effective model. They're only going to work with particular large corporations for coding because it could hack into all the systems. So that's today. Who knows what next week will bring? But we really got to be up to speed on things.
I'll add also, I think that there's a lot of pressure to know everything about it. And I don't know that you need to know everything in order to experiment and be curious.
Mhm.
And I think if we can create spaces for learning where new adopters or early adopters are engaging with folks and kind of talking about it. I mean, the other piece that I think is really relevant for student affairs is that it streamlines an incredible some of the most monotonous, maybe exhausting, time consuming aspects of our work. And so just even providing some use cases for folks. Our undergrad ed team has a monthly professional development series, and there was one on AI use as a thought partner. And it is I think it's an interesting way to think of uh, a not a person, obviously, but like what would you give to an intern that you might want them to experiment with or learn about and then come back to you and share what they found, right? Like if you think of it that way, of course you're going to check their work and of course you're going to engage with them in a conversation to fine tune it and maybe make it better. But having that as a thought partner as you're working through challenging situations, again, ethically, and I think that's the key is that we need to make sure that we're normalizing that. We're also not using AI to replace the human interactions. I just gave an example that replaced a human interaction with this AI intern role. But the reality is that if we can learn from one another about systems and ways to align usage with our values and mission, and if we can lead, if folks who are in higher ed leadership roles can lead with that area of curiosity, I think the larger field will be better served.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Keith, you've written this whole book on this topic called the curricular approach. So, can you tell me a little bit more about that and how it can help student affairs leaders thrive in challenging times?
Yeah, I think the curricular approach is kind of a tonic for our times with all the things coming at us, helps us be intentional, clear, aligned, and integrated. I remember sitting in so many directors' meetings where we were all sitting around a conference room table, much like the one behind Dr. Edwards. And it was like every director had an oar and we were paddling in this boat. But because we were all working so hard, but not in a unified direction, the boat didn't go anywhere, just kind of sadly twirled around. Versus if we can really be intentional, clear, aligned, and integrated, then you're one of those crew boats that just flies, right? With everybody doing a different thing but with a shared sense of purpose. And I think that's one way to think about the curricular approach. There's also a lot of results that we see, a lot of schools that move to a curricular approach, increased retention, better use of resources, better staff engagement, reduced conduct, more proactive on student mental health issues. So many benefits as we go. And I work with a lot of campuses to figure out what they want their students to learn and then align what they're doing day to day by each functional area with that. The curricular approach, the analogy is, what would be the major for learning beyond the classroom? Would it be leadership? Would it be global citizenship? Would it be something else? And then once we're very clear what that major is, through goals and outcomes and rubrics and narratives and all sorts of things, then how do we organize orientation to contribute to that, and res life and the career center and athletics and health promotion, so that we are all rowing in the same direction with very different ways and very different ways of engaging with students. And when you can really leverage that, we stop competing with each other for those 10% of students who will show up to a bunch of stuff and start organizing ourselves to say, how can we collectively reach every one of our students about healthy conflict management, for instance, about self-awareness, about leadership, about community engagement. And so I work with a bunch of schools to launch that and then to do ongoing support for that. And it's been, I was just with a group, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, that had launched less than a year ago, and the benefits they're realizing about how we could get on the same page. And as I was in the room, they were sharing some of the benefits of their alignment, and then saying, we all send out a bunch of newsletters that nobody reads. What if we sent out one newsletter every 2 weeks that had all of that stuff, that was really well done, that was really well thought out? And I think that's just a good example that students might ignore 12 newsletters from around campus in a week, but they might pay attention if they just got one every couple of weeks. That was just the best of things. So it helps us prioritize and be clear, and not be competing with each other.
Can I say something to both
Please.
Keith's credibility in this space? Because I think one, he has been instrumental in the foundation of this model, but also stretching it and taking it further. Keith, I think you've been to Michigan State twice, specifically around our curricular approach. Our folks in housing have influenced now our larger campus undergraduate learning outcomes, and the development. I just sat on a committee. We're working on developing a set of new undergraduate learning outcomes, are really looking at how do we blend the curricular approach from our housing area and our student affairs area with the academic expectations that we have of students as well. And so our new set of learning outcomes were really informed by the previous work that Keith did with us 7 years ago, and then again, maybe 3 years ago, to build. I know it's been a minute, but I think that's that's the key. And it's given us a common language to talk about
Yeah.
the way that we want to align our work around kind of this shared motivation and shared coordinated movement.
That's a great point. And I think, curricular approaches started in housing and residence life. Because that's where those of us who are thinking about it were working. There's no other reason. And then they started to become divisional, right? Entire divisions of student affairs having a shared curricular approach that they were working to. And now what we're seeing is university-wide approaches,
Yep.
where it's not just the division of student affairs, but it's also athletics and marketing and advancement and academic affairs saying, what do we want? What if we all came together around 5 goals and we promised that to every student? We organized the whole enterprise, not just student affairs, around that. And we're seeing that as sort of a top-down approach where presidents are leading that and wanting the whole university to do that. And also bottom up where it started in Res Life and it's expanded and now all of student affairs, but also this unit and this unit and this unit. And people are going, well, why aren't we all doing that? And people are going, that sounds great. So there's kind of a top down and a bottom up from residential to student affairs to university wide. So it's an exciting time to be in that space and watching all the innovation that people are developing on their campuses for their students in their context.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think particularly in times where leaders have to justify budgets and figure out, okay, well, why should we have money for this, that, or the other? And I think being able to demonstrate clear, learning outcomes and achievement of those learning outcomes, I think can go a long way, particularly, thinking about VPs of student affairs who might be in a cabinet meeting with folks from academic affairs and finance and other places. I think being able to, I think sometimes it can almost seem like the folks in that room are all speaking a different language. But what you're describing to me sounds like more of a common language that works across the university. And so I think that sounds very powerful.
Yeah, common language and then aligned and integrated implementation. Let's stop telling students to stop studying, stop going to the student org thing, stop going to their soccer practice, and come to our event at 7 o'clock in the lounge. And instead think, where are students wrestling with this already? How do we deliver it wherever they are in whatever mode that means? Which leads us to this magical real estate where things get easier for us as staff and more powerful for students. And once you tap into that a little bit, you want to expand it quite a bit more.
Yeah. One of my other positions at Michigan State was exploring the development and implementation of a co-curricular record project. And so the other benefit, I think, of this idea is that students are better equipped to tell the story of your institution. And better able to say, as a result of participating in those additional co-curricular experiences, what did I learn that actually contributed to my overall? Our record is called the Spartan Experience Record. So, coupled with the transcript, it's an important document for students to be able to talk about. This is what I got out of my my time at that institution. And so, I think the curricular approach and the outcomes and all of that work helps students tell that story really effectively.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, Heather, I'm sure you work with a combination of new and established leaders. For those that are new to their roles, what's some advice that you give these new leaders in maybe their first 90 days?
Yeah. I actually am in the process of hiring 2 new program directors right now. So this is really a relevant question. And I think, when I arrived into this role, again, it's only been about a year and 9 months. I recognized that the most important role that I had as a new leader was to listen and to understand what some of the patterns were that organization or unit had maybe fallen into. In some cases, those team dynamics are actually something that needs to be addressed right away, but not in a we're going to change it, but we're going to listen. We're going to address the tensions. We're going to clarify expectations. Looking for those patterns. And I think through that listening process and having one-on-one conversations, having group conversations, you can really, I think, gain a lot during that first 90-day period. I think the tendency is for new leaders to come and improve themselves early and building really quickly this like I'm in charge kind of mentality. And I really hope that new leaders come in with a little bit more humility, and work to understand the environment and the culture before they try to change it. And I think that means not only those who they're directly working with, but also the supervisors and others who work within their kind of colleague group. Uh, and I will also say, I think new leaders can do some level setting around normalizing boundaries, normalizing sustainable workplace environments, normalize, the enthusiasm for coming to work. I think COVID has created all kinds of interesting work patterns for folks. And some folks, I think, arrived on campus post COVID believing that they were owed remote days and they were owed kind of more hybrid work environments. And my goal all along is we need to honor that because staff, are tired and getting burned out. But I also want to make coming to work a joyful place, right? The work is hard, and if you can't have a little bit of fun while doing it, and so encouraging leaders to kind of be their authentic selves, but build that kind of capacity for the team to move forward. Yeah, I feel like my role in my current office is really developing that community of support among the staff so that they can rely on each other and work together, because we have 5 different programs. They certainly all don't need to be doing the exact same thing. We don't need 5 FAFSA nights. We need one FAFSA night that all program participants can come to. And just something as simple as that was like a complete paradigm shift.
Well, I remember Rebecca is listening, and she was mentioning that these silos are real because sometimes we can just get caught up and not not working together. But it's important as leaders that we kind of break through that. Um, so Keith, as you're thinking about skills that student affairs leaders need in this current environment, if you were to say what were your top 3, what would they be?
I think the ability to learn, to be curious, to explore, to sort through what's nonsense and what's not, and be helpful. Um, because I don't know what challenges we'll be focused on in 6 months, but it'll be different than the ones we're talking about today. So I think the ability to learn, I think just the human skills of empathy, connection, humor, our ability to do that, um, and then to do our inner work. I think inner work maybe sounds selfish or self-involved or self-indulgent until you see a senior leader who hasn't done it,
Yep.
and the chaos around them and the fear as a result of that. Um, so I think the more inner work that we can do so that we can be the calm eye at the center of the storm. And I think student affairs folks have a huge advantage of that because much of our preparation programs and where we came and why we chose this, and all of those team builders, we've done some inner work along the way that frankly you don't see often. Often you don't see in provosts and senior financial officers and others. Um, but where can we do more of that inner work so that we can, I talk about the president who shows up to the town hall after the bias incident and can sit and have students lash out in their hurt and pain and anger and say hurtful, deeply hurtful things, and probably some things that aren't entirely true. And that leader still be able to be in empathy and compassion in spite of that, which is what's needed. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard to be blamed and attacked and in some ways unfairly and maintain empathy and compassion and connection for students. And when leaders have done their self work, they're able to do that kind of thing. Or to be, and as we heard earlier at ACPA, to be in the meeting where the provost says some really dumb stuff and keep your cool and not be reactive and not lash out, but to be thoughtful in your framing and how you're addressing, not to ignore it or be passive, but how are you going to address that in a way that's, I mean, those are just two examples among many about the things. So I would say learning, inner work, and then the second one, which I've already forgotten.
Well, that is quite all right. I think you've kind of described some of the things that I think student affairs leaders need. As we wrap up, what are some books, podcasts, things that you think our listeners need to know? It's okay to let us know if they're ones that you were participating in, but things that you think they would find helpful.
I mean, we would be remiss if we did not mention our own podcast, Student Affairs Now, which you can find at studentaffairsnow.com. Uh, we have been going for over 5 years at creating a weekly episode, sometimes more than one episode a week. So we're over 330 episodes, I think, at this point. We recently just launched a Patreon, not really to create an extension of the learning community so that folks can engage with us. Podcasts are kind of a one-way communication, and we wanted an opportunity for folks to engage with each other. And so I'm obviously very biased, but I love engaging with and participating in the creation of Student Affairs Now. In terms of books, I have two that I continually go back to. One is Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, thinking about how we work through adaptation and relationship to make small changes to our environments that have a large impact, and that you have to kind of lead at the speed of organizational trust. The other one is really about leadership, and that's Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I pick that up very frequently because, to me, I think being a vulnerable, courageous, values-centered leader, and actually showing who I am on the inside, not just a facade or armor, as she calls it in the book, is really powerful. So those are the two books that I'd share. I listen to a lot of other podcasts, lots of true crime, lots of other kinds of news podcasts. If I didn't listen to Up First every day, I think I would, that's my 10-minute news bite. And then there are a lot of other higher ed podcasts that are great. College Matters. The folks at ACE have a podcast called .edu that I've really enjoyed listening to over time. And then the Mel Robbins podcast and We Can Do Hard Things. Those are my guilty pleasures. So, Keith, what do you got?
Well, one of the best lessons I ever learned in grad school was never follow Heather Shea. She'll make you look bad. You always want to go before Heather, or even better yet, go with Heather, which is what I have made me so successful in my career, is partnering with Heather. Um, I'll, two of those books are the ones I have four to recommend, and she already took two of them. But I would say Student Affairs Now is great. There's 330 episodes. Don't try and listen to them all, but go back and find the ones and search for the ones and look through the ones that are really meaningful and feel relevant to you now and what you're facing. We're not trying to sell you on the podcast that we released this week. Each week we're just trying to add another one to the catalog. I would also really recommend the Current Campus Context episode. Heather does one of those basically every month. It's a great way to sort through the signal and the noise. And the way she's set that up with our contributors, they're always paying attention to the news all the time because they never know when they're going to be on the next episode. So they're always thinking, they're always engaging, they're always talking about it. So you get really informed takes on what is happening. So those I think are can't miss for leaders. The four books, the number one book I recommend is Essentialism by Greg McKeown, about the disciplined pursuit of less. How could you do less so you could be more? I think about that many times every day. Dare to Lead, I think it's the best of Brene Brown's for leaders. Emergent Strategy, which Heather also mentioned. I just think in 30 years, we're going to look back at Adrienne
Yeah.
Marie Brown as one of the greatest thinkers of our time, the way we now
Yep.
think about Bell Hooks or Maya Angelou or Grace Lee Boggs. I
Yep.
think that she is one of the best thinkers of our time. The other one I would add is Trauma Stewardship by
Yeah.
Laura Van Lipsky. I got to chat with her on the podcast, so you can find that. But that book about how do we lead people who are engaging in trauma support so that they are well, so that they are not overwhelmed, so that they are not in their what she calls trauma mastery response. I just think that's really useful for any leaders in student affairs as we're navigating through that.
Well, thank you for that. Actually, the TACUSPA, our webinars committee, actually just completed a series on trauma-informed leadership. And so I think that's seems to be a recurring theme here that's important for student affairs leaders. So
Yep.
encourage y'all to check those out on our YouTube channel if you ever get a chance. Yeah, I really appreciate you all for joining us today in for this really important discussion on leadership and changing times and student affairs. Dr. Edwards and Dr. Shea. Some of the takeaways that I got from this were learning to learn, as being an important skill for surviving in this period of change. Higher education isn't really changing as rapid as the world around us, but that kind of needs to change. Discerning the important from the noise, I think is an important skill. Being able to prioritize, uh, figuring out how to blur the lines between academic affairs and student affairs to support student success, um, aligning student affairs with strategic priorities, building an ecosystem of support, helping students develop both AI skills and ethics, being thoughtful instead of reactive as a leader when it comes to using AI, being authentic but building capacity, using empathy as a leader, again, being a learner, doing the inner work. Some of the different resources that were mentioned include Student Affairs Now, particularly the Current Campus Context episode or episodes, the College Matters podcast and the .edu podcast, as well as Mel Robbins and We Can Do Hard Things. Books that were recommended, including Emergent Strategy, Dare to Lead, Essentialism, and Trauma Stewardship. So with that, I say thank you again, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Billups.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Our next webinar Wednesday will be on next Wednesday, April 15th at noon. We'll repeat one of your favorite sessions from our Fall 2025 conference, Next Gen Leaders, Supervising with the Gen Z Lens. Please invite a colleague to join us. Finally, the TACUSPA membership year runs from January to December. If you're not yet a member of TACUSPA, we encourage you to join us. Thank you and have a great day.
That was terrific. We had so much fun. Thank you to TACUSPA, Dr. Hilda Billups for organizing, and Dr. Anthony Edwards for hosting. And thanks to our sponsor of today's episode, Evolve. Given the current context of higher education, we need to invest in leaders with the capacity and capabilities to transform their institutions and the future of higher education. The Evolve Institute for Higher Education Leadership offers 4 leadership coaching journeys tailored to 4 different leadership levels. Each is a 3-month journey that includes individual and group coaching, plus a curated curriculum of short asynchronous video modules. We also offer Evolve for leadership teams. If you're ready to evolve your leadership voice, visit evolve-institute.com to learn more. And as always, a huge shout out to our producer, Natalie Ambrosi, who does all the good work behind the scenes to make us look and sound good. And we love your support of this conversations. Thank you for listening, sharing, and recommending these episodes. You can help us reach even more folks by subscribing to the podcast on YouTube or our weekly newsletter where we share each new episodes on Wednesday mornings. If you're so inclined, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps these conversations reach even more folks. I'm Keith Edwards. Thanks to our fabulous hosts today, Dr. Anthony Edwards, and our organizer, Dr. Hilda Billups, and our partner, TACUSPA, and to my fellow guest, Dr. Heather Shea. Thanks to everyone who is watching and listening. Make it a great week.